You spend an hour turning wooden pegs. A quarter turn, then another, for a full hour. Then you empty a tray of spools and fill it again, and empty it, and fill it. For another hour. It is the most boring thing you have ever done in your life. And that is not an accident. Festinger designed it that way on purpose. He needed something so pointless that nobody could possibly enjoy it. Then the man running it asks you for a favor. His assistant hasn't shown up. Would you mind telling the next participant, the one waiting outside, that it was fun? Interesting, enjoyable. He offers to pay you for it. Here is where it gets strange. Some people were offered $20. Others were offered $1. They all did it. They all walked out and told a stranger the boring task was fun. Some of them were quite convincing. But afterwards, when researchers asked them privately what they really thought, only one group had changed their mind. It wasn't the one you'd expect. The man behind it was Leon Festinger at Stanford in 1959. And he was chasing an idea he'd found in the strangest place. A few years earlier, he had infiltrated a doomsday cult, a group who believed a flood would end the world on a specific date and that a spaceship would rescue the believers at midnight. They quit jobs, gave away possessions, left families. Midnight came. Nothing happened. And here's what Festinger watched. The believers did not fall apart and admit they'd been wrong. Instead, after a few hours, their leader announced that God had been so moved by their faith that he'd spared the world. They had saved everyone. And this group, who had always avoided publicity, suddenly started calling newspapers. They became more convinced than before. That made no sense. More evidence against a belief made the belief stronger. The people who had given away the least were the first to quietly drop out. The ones who had sacrificed everything held on hardest. So Festinger went looking for the mechanism, and he found it in the most boring hour ever engineered. Here's what he understood. Your mind cannot comfortably hold two facts that contradict each other. I am an honest person, and I just lied to that stranger for $1. Those two don't fit, and the gap between them is physically uncomfortable. He called it dissonance. It works like hunger. It's a state you need to get rid of. Now, you have two ways to close that gap. You can change your behavior, but you can't. It's already done. Or you can change your belief. So watch what happens to the $20 group. They lied, and they know exactly why. $20. In 1959, that's a serious amount of money. There's no gap to close. I lied because I got paid well. Perfectly comfortable. And so, in private, they still said the task was boring. Their opinion never moved. $20 bought their words. It didn't touch their mind. Now the $1 group. They lied too, but for $1. That's not enough to explain it. They can't tell themselves they did it for the money, because nobody sells their honesty for $1. So the gap opens. And the only way to close it is to change the belief itself. And they did. The $1 group, asked privately, said the task had actually been quite enjoyable. They didn't lie about it. They believed it. $1 rewrote their memory of an hour of their life. Read that again. The people who were paid less were the ones who changed their minds. Pay someone enough, and they'll do what you want. Pay them almost nothing, and they'll convince themselves they wanted to. This has been tested over and over for 60 years, and it keeps holding. Children who were mildly warned not to play with a toy went on to genuinely like that toy less than children who were threatened with a severe punishment. A weak reason forces you to supply the rest yourself. A strong reason does the work for you and leaves your beliefs untouched. There's a second version, and it's worse. When people had to go through an embarrassing initiation to join a group, they rated the group as far more interesting than people who joined easily. The group was identical. It was a deliberately dull discussion. But if it cost you something to get in, your mind decides it must have been worth getting into. That's why hard initiations create loyalty. Not despite the pain. Because of it. The harder the door is to get through, the more valuable the room must be. Your mind will not accept that you suffered for something ordinary. This is the uncomfortable truth Festinger exposed. We think our actions come from our beliefs. Very often, it runs the other way. You do something, and then your mind quietly writes the belief that makes it make sense. And you don't experience that as a rewrite. You experience it as your opinion. You have felt the edge of this. The expensive thing you defended harder than the cheap one. The job you stayed in, telling yourself the parts you hated were character building. The queue you waited in for 2 hours and then swore was worth it. The opinion you argued for out loud once and somehow believed a bit more afterwards. You weren't being dishonest. You were closing a gap. But here is the part that should give you hope, because this cuts both ways. The same machinery that traps you can be pointed forward. Act like the person you want to be, with no reward and no audience, and your mind will do what it always does. It will build a belief to match. Do a kind thing for someone who can never repay you, and you don't just help them. You quietly become someone who is kind. The belief follows the behavior. That's not a metaphor. It's the same mechanism running in the direction you chose. Leon Festinger didn't prove that people are liars. He proved that we are storytellers, and the story always gets written after the fact, to protect a version of ourselves we can live with. So the next time you catch yourself defending something a little too hard, ask the only question that matters. Do I believe this because it's true? Or because of what it already cost me to believe it? Because the mind doesn't work like a judge. It works like a lawyer, and it has already been hired. Would you have said it was fun for $1 and be honest? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to understand the experiments that reveal who we really are, this is the human experiment. I'll see you in the next case.